On this episode of Narcissist Apocalypse, we talk with an abuse survivor named Rebelle, and Rebelle was married to a vindictive abuser. It's a story of victimhood, the power of fate, weaponized incompetence, gaslighting, and post-separation abuse. Welcome to Narcissist Apocalypse, everyone. I am Brandon Chadwick, and with me today we have Rebelle. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. And if you want to be a guest like Rebelle is today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com. Click on the guest form button, fill it out, and press the submit button. Also, at our website, we have a support group with Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. And we also have a newsletter at our website that gets you free workbooks for every new survivor story. All of this is at narcissistapocalypse.com. And for today, we do not have a content warning. And you're going to be hearing about Rebelle's story today. And Rebelle was confused for a lot of time in this relationship. She knew something was off, but it was really hard to pinpoint. And she started to feel like maybe it's her, the one that has these issues, because so many people actually liked her husband. He was a very charming guy, but she would still get glimpses here and there of who he really was. She could see it, but then there would always be these resets. And it wasn't until they were separated that Rebelle discovered who he truly was. And I know Rebelle will validate many of you out there today. And now I'm going to get out of my way and your way. Rebelle, the floor is now yours.
I grew up in Florida and very normal upbringing. And my father's a lawyer, and I became a lawyer. My grandfather was a lawyer, so have a line of lawyers and artists in my family. And grew up in a beach town and very normal upbringing. I was always a pretty high achiever, always pretty driven in sports and in school. I was always a really optimistic kid, very social, and I felt like my small town was too small for me. I couldn't wait to get out and see the world. I had a huge passion for adventure and new things. Um, I wasn't afraid of much. I was never afraid of anything really growing up. I just didn't have a lot of fears about anything. Really felt I could do whatever I wanted. I didn't really listen to authority. I didn't, not that I was rebellious, because I wasn't. I had an inner voice that directed me, that I listened to over adult authority, other adults. It was just, I was very driven by an inner voice. And I really couldn't fight it, to be honest. It was who I am, and I've always been that way. So after college, I wanted to ski for a year, and thought I would go out and work a ski season. And I had been going to Colorado since I was 8 years old, and just fell in love with it for the first time. I was there when I was 8 and said I would live here. I knew I would. And when I went out there, I met my ex-boyfriend, who was a pro mogul skier. So I met him right when I moved there, and I had a built-in coach, and he was amazingly patient and worked with me, and I was driven and wanted to get better. And so within 3 years of living there, I joined the freestyle team and started competing in mogul competitions, and excelled pretty quick, and was ranked top 50 in the country in my second year of competing, I think. And we had a couple on our team go to the Olympics. And once I saw that, I mean, that was my dream. That's what I wanted. I had a very supportive boyfriend. So I worked really hard. I trained and worked 2 jobs, and that was my passion. And then For the next Olympics that I would have been able to qualify for, I would have been 32 years old. So I was 28 at the time, and life decisions coming at me, not sure what to do. I decided to apply to law school, but I still wasn't sure what I wanted to do, if I wanted to try to make it to the Olympics or not. But that was my dream. And then in June, when I was 28, I was hit head on by a drunk driver, and spent 2 months in the hospital. And really, I got out of the hospital in a wheelchair, had to learn how to walk again, run again, all of that. When I got out of the hospital, I started law school in a wheelchair a week later. And because I was at the time when I was in the hospital, the doctors didn't know what to do. And they didn't think I should be starting law school because I was in physical therapy every day, all of this. And I needed some normalcy so badly. I needed to know that I was all right. So I insisted. I said, I'm starting law school. I don't care. My parents were extremely supportive and made it happen. And my mom would wheel me in to class and carry my books in the first week. And as I started to get onto a walker and then crutches, and then was able to obviously take care of myself. And so I was then in law school for 3 years. And after the accident in law school, I felt like on top of the world. I thought, living through that, I would say it to my parents and friends, I can handle anything. I can handle anything now. I would laugh about, oh, people will be stressed out in law school about exams. I know the difference now. I know that, what stress is, and, hoping to live and things like that. So I'll never sweat the small stuff. And I had this attitude that I've already seen the worst. And I thought I could handle anything.
So, right here, you are pretty strong. I think everyone listening would hear you and say, you're a strong person. And it's possibly this version of you is someone who might say to themselves, well, I'm strong. I can handle anything, but I've been through this, I've been through that. Someone like me would never get into a relationship that would be abusive. However, that strength, I believe, is also what might keep you in a relationship even longer or further because of the way that you are viewing yourself. And it's a strength, but it's also a weakness. So eventually, during everything here, you do meet this person that the story is about at the age of 31. So tell us about this first meeting and how things, go from there.
As I said, I've always listened to an inner voice. I felt a very strong intuition. So the first time I met my ex-husband, it was at a barbecue, and I was in my last year of law school. And I met quite a few different guys that night that I spoke to, but he and I had something in common. We had both lived in another state where we had worked next door to each other and had mutual friends. So it was very, surprising. We had all these coincidences when we met. And I definitely thought he was younger than me and definitely not on the professional track like myself, being in law school, etc. But I didn't really think anything of it that night. And later, somebody asked me if I would give my phone number out. That a guy from the party was asking for my phone number, and I asked, "Well, who?" Because I spoke to several people, and my friend didn't know who was asking. So I said, "Yeah, well, don't give it out if you don't know who's asking." Anyhow, a year goes by, and I am out one night, and this guy is staring at me, and he looks very familiar, but I can't place it. And then I thought he was somebody's little brother. We finally passed each other, and he, said something to me, and I said, "Aren't you so and so's little brother?" And he said, "No, but you're from this town where we used to live." And I was surprised because I didn't understand how he would know that. And then he reminded me that we had met that year before. And I was like, "Oh, right. Now I remember who you are." And he said, "I've been trying to find you for a year." And I was like, "Oh, right. Now I remember who you are." And he said, "I've been trying to find you for a year." And he said, "I've been trying to find you for a year." And I was like, "Oh, right. Now I remember who you are." And he said, "I've been trying to find you for a year." And I thought it was kind of a line. I was like, oh, really? I said, I don't even, I don't recall you asking for my number when I met you. And he just said, I can't believe I found you. I've been looking for you, but I knew I would find you. And I've just never forgotten that night. And so anyhow, he said, we were in a bar with a bunch of friends and stuff. And he said, I'm leaving right now. Give me your number. And he left. And he called me immediately and he said, left a message. And he said, I can't believe I found you after all this time. I always knew I would. And just a very charming, charming message. And we started dating immediately.
And here's a moment where you might have not have known anything like this before, but by the way he's talking, it sounds like fate had stepped in.
You better believe it. That's exactly what it felt like.
And is that a different type of intoxication when that is thrown into the mix? Like this was just a regular person before, but now this story that's getting mixed into it, you're now on this journey of a story that wasn't even your story, but it's about how this person has been pining after you for a long time and only thinking about you. And it's coming off as romantic, but in other circumstances, that could be real creepy.
I took it 100% romantically. Just, oh, what an impression I must have made, and that kind of thing. And then there was a lot of serendipitous moments that contribute to it as well. Of course, like I said, we had lived in another state, we had worked next door to each other, we had mutual friends, and then we're in Colorado at this point. Then when he asked me to do something for Thanksgiving, it turns out he was going to my old town where I used to live in Colorado and having Thanksgiving with my old roommate. I mean, there were so many serendipitous things. It was bizarre. His best friend was from my hometown. I mean, there were many things that contributed to this just fate feeling. And I think the first date we went on, somebody called him by a name and I didn't understand it. And he said, oh, it's short for my last name. You better learn it because it's going to be your last name. It was full on from the beginning and very intense and intoxicating. Like I said, I was such a high level skier that when you've been a high level athlete, you want a man that can meet you there. And he had been a high level athlete as well. And he was a snowboarder. So we spent our weekends skiing and snowboarding in the winter and then hiking 14,000 foot peaks in the summer. I mean, it was very adrenaline based.
And this person right here is talking up this fantasy. And when you're thinking about him now in the aftermath, what is he really about? And eventually you might learn more about how he grew up. So what can you tell us about that stuff like right now before we kind of move forward?
He was a bit of a victim. He had some tough things happen and, it made me feel really sorry for him and want to kind of protect him and be the strong one and be like, I can show you, real love. And yeah, he had a very woundedness about him, a innocent look is the way it came across. And like I said, he was very intoxicating and so into me. And I even moved back up to the mountains. I took a job and moved back up to the mountains, and he wanted to continue to commute and for us to stay together. And he had told me he did certain things for his work, and I believed a lot of things without verifying. And back then, yes, I would say that what struck me the most was that he had some tough things in childhood and stuff, and that there was a woundedness about him that I wanted to fill, to make better.
So right here, it's pretty interesting right off the bat. In my belief, it's like if you had one person or type of person that could be someone that can get into your life and infiltrate your life and become the abuser of your life, this seems to be like the perfect kind of fit for you. He looks a certain way. He has the story. There's fate. And that story that he's giving to you about his past, it is now, I'm the strong one. You're strong and you can take care of this. You can get this person to be like you're going to be this kind of power couple in a way, and you're going to help will them to the spot that they need to be. So, right here, how does your story unfold from here?
So I had taken a job up in the mountains, and I'd moved, and he, wanted to stay committed to the relationship, and he decided that he would move up to the mountains with me, and I was able to get him a job, and I felt there were some red flags then at that time, but I took it to believe, because I found out he was actually selling weed for a living and not doing the job that I thought he was doing. And I pretty much said, well, I'm not going to continue with this if this is what you're choosing to do. And he said, no, I want to give that up, and I'll move up there and give all of that up. And that's what he did. And I got him a job because he had previous chef experience, and kind of how you explained it, of like, I took it as, wow, he's like doing all of this. He needed me in his life to come into his life and show him the right way. And I can be this guidance for him, and we could be this amazing power couple, like you said. And that's how I saw it. And him wanting to pursue that and give up his past life proved that to me. And so remember, he was living away from me before he moved in with me. And I would say there was an underlying sense, my inner voice was nagging at me at times, that I didn't know what I didn't know, but I knew there was something I didn't know. But he was amazing at telling me that absolutely not. I don't see any other women when you're not around. I don't even look at them, that kind of thing. But there would be times where he would stare at other women to the point it was so incredibly obvious that I would think he's intentionally trying to make me react. I mean, nobody stares to that degree. And he would tell me basically that I was absolutely crazy, that he was looking at something behind them or something like that. I mean, so the gaslighting started early on. And when I started questioning, different things of women calling on his phone, I mean, he always had an explanation, always some kind of detailed, outrageous explanation. And when you're in it and somebody is professing to love you so much and showing that, you don't think that they would be just outrageously lying to you. It's that cognitive dissonance. You can't reconcile that in your head. And so even one time, when he was telling me that I was jealous, and I called my old boyfriend, who I was with for 5 years, and I called him and said, was I a jealous girlfriend? Was I crazy jealous? And he kind of laughed and was like, no, I mean, and my ex-husband had made me feel that I was wrong for questioning, and that I was the one that was overreacting and making such a big deal of something that there was no big deal. And unfortunately, I didn't trust myself in that respect. I questioned myself instead of questioning him. And then when he moved up there with me, I found pretty concrete evidence that he had called a girl that he had dated previously, one time that he'd gone for the weekend, and we had it out. I confronted him, and he just broke down crying and begging for my forgiveness, saying he just has this problem of sometimes needing validation. There's nothing to it. It's just that sometimes in a moment of weakness, he needs some outside validation, and it's a problem, and he knows he needs to fix it. And I got the tears, and I got the whole thing, and I bought it all, hook, line, and sinker. And I believe he really meant all of that, wanted to change, didn't want to be that person. And the poor thing, it all happened because he did say, as a result of his childhood, that's why he sought this validation, and he knows it's wrong. And I fell for it. And then we got engaged, and there were a couple of incidences. So it would always be fairly good and then some big incident and a shocking incident that was just that polar opposite of what the relationship was like. And you're like, where did this come from? And so before we got married, I did start seeing a therapist myself. And I would tell her that this is a man that stands outside my shower with a towel ready to dry me off, and he caters to me and he brings me a tea and things like that. But then he'll silence his phone when it rings. He has all these excuses when I do find out if a woman is called, and there's all these wild explanations, and I was really seeking an outside voice to help me figure out what was going on. And she would end up talking about how amazing the little things he was doing for me was, and she would reinforce it to think that it was, wow, that you found a man that does that kind of stuff for you. And so we got married, and the wedding was amazing. I do remember our first dance, and I remember just looking at him saying, "Are you happy?" Because that inner voice was feeling something. I knew it. There was something I could feel, but it wasn't something tangible that I could point to or understand. And he, could put on that smile and be like, "Absolutely." And then everybody would tell me, "You are so lucky. He's so in love with you." Because, boy, he would profess it to anybody listening and to all of my friends. When my friends were around, he made grand productions of how in love he was with me. And I would often, my friends would say, "He's just so in love with you." Or I'd meet somebody new and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've heard all about you. He's just has told me all these wonderful things." And I would always sit there and think to myself, "What's wrong with you? Why don't you get this? Why don't you feel this? There's something wrong with you." But then on our honeymoon, I'll never forget this. He said to me, "Do you know what my best man said to me at the wedding?" I said, "No, what?" He said, "Man, his name, I always thought you'd marry a supermodel." And I just looked at him like, "What?" I was just so thrown off, and I couldn't understand why he was saying that to me. I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah." He said he always thought I'd marry a supermodel. And I erupted, absolutely erupted. I mean, fiercely in anger, and because I've reacted with anger most of my life instead of hurt. That's just the way I reacted to things. And so it was a pretty huge blow up. And I think he learned then to be a little bit more subtle about how he was going to tear me down. But I do see that as a big turning point.
So when something like this happens, you have your reaction. What is his reaction? And what ends up happening after both of you react?
That one was a really big one. Typically, he would stonewall in an argument and very dismissive. So it just escalated things. And then he would just, "Let's just forget it. Let's just sweep it under the rug. Let's just forget it. Let's just start over. Let's just start over." I mean, if I heard that once, I heard that in our entire marriage. "Let's just forget about that. Let's just start over." There was never any resolution, resolving, talking things out. And I think there was a way that he would control the situation with his silence, and that he would break it open a little bit in like almost like crumbs, that I would be desperate for a reaction, and everything would dissipate finally because I was so relieved to finally have some engagement. So it ended up being, for the rest of our marriage, I constantly let him off the hook when these fights happened, because this was the way it went. When I say stonewalled, I mean not a word, nothing. And he would sit there with this contemptuous look on his face.
So from here, you do end up going to see your first marriage counselor together.
First year of marriage. And I think that one was instigated by his contact with other women, phone calls, things like that. that he would deny or explain away or whatever. And nothing really got resolved whatsoever in that first therapist. And then many life events intervened, big ones in our lives that first year of marriage, which kind of took the focus off of us. So we moved to another town and thought it would be a really good move for his job. I was taking a new job and I wanted to buy a house because I had a new job and he would be working in a really great place for his job. And I was working hard and he was barely working. He had part-time work. And I would just beg and plead for him to do work around the house, to work on it and stuff. And while he was just living a good life while I was working. So, second marriage counselor, and he had no job really. And I was fed up. And yeah, I guess that was the second year of marriage. And because I do think that once we were married, his real nature was showing much more. And it was a big change from when we were dating. But I didn't find a lot of support. With the therapist, it was like, well, he's trying to find a job. What do you want him to do? Do you want him to work at the local grocery store? Well, why not? It's a job. I don't care. There was a lot of coddling of him, victimizing him, because of course, when we'd sit down in counseling, we'd get the whole, story that I had gotten, of his victimness and victimhood. So I was painted to be, well, you're this strong person. Oh, you're so strong. I mean, you kind of married somebody that wasn't as strong as you. And I'd always walk out of there feeling, why should I have to apologize for being strong and capable?
So right here, stuff with other women has continued, and you're getting someone who is entitled. They don't want to work a lower level job. They see themselves as this thing. They have a certain version of themselves that they want to be. Some things are below them. He's done stonewalling with you already, which puts you into like a bit of like a panic kind of stuff that goes on with that. So that's kind of one thing that's going on. These slights that took place on the honeymoon, this put down where he's doing it from the perspective of someone else. So he's bringing someone else into this conversation as a triangulation to like reinforce the thing that he's said. So these little things here are adding up. You've been to a marriage counselor twice already, and in some way, the way he's acting sounds like he's a teenager in a lot of ways, wanting to like do whatever he's going to do. And you're the responsible one, and you're now in this role of being the mom and caretaking all of his victimhood and his angstiness and what he wants to be when he grows up, and he wants to do whatever he wants. So in one way, you're above him, but I'm not saying that you're above him, but the way he's looking at you as far as like take care of me is above you. But the other thing is it's kind of a reverse. Like you're above him in that aspect, but in another aspect, he's looking down upon you because he's taking advantage of everything and he's controlling all of this. So it's kind of like this weird relationship in that matter. And now here for you, as something you've kind of already hinted at before, you have like these cycles where there's a repair that can happen and then you move on and things can be good for a bit. And that is about to happen here again when you watch the movie The Secret. And this is going to restart a whole cycle for you again, because a big part of your story is cycles.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And those cycles is what kept me so off balance. Because I think I would be close to leaving and he would sense that and he, would go over the top to make things better. And so we watched this movie, The Secret, and it gave us both this new way of thinking that we can think about our future and manifest our biggest dreams, by doing some of these really specific thinking methods and thinking positively and envisioning the things that you wanted. And it kind of gave us a common goal. And really, like, for the first time in our marriage, I felt like we were unified and working towards something. And I do think I was a lot closer to leaving before this happened. And I think looking back, he knew that. He knew that. And he knew he had to lay it on thick. And so we did have this really unified, feeling of picturing our goals. And of course, I had very big aspirations. And so we would discuss these grand plans for the future. So he was very much involved in that. And so we had this period of time where we were unified and working towards a common goal. And so I decided I wanted to have a baby. And he did too. And so we had our son, and I had to have a C-section as a result of my previous car accident. My parents were both there. So when we came home from the hospital with our son, I did ask him to one day take my dad up on the mountain, because we lived in the mountains, take my dad skiing, and because my mom was there, and they went skiing one day, and then for the rest of the week he continued to go skiing. And here I thought we were going to have this bonding family time. I just brought our son home from the hospital, and he's off doing his own thing as he always did. And I was really hurt and angry. And so I remember a fight broke out and a big argument, and he went his normal stonewalling, but he couldn't leave like he normally could because my parents were there. He didn't want to walk out of the house. So we went to the guest room and slept in the guest room. And I had to get up every 2 hours to feed the baby, to feed my son. And I had stitches from the C-section. So before, he had been getting up and handing the baby to me from the bassinet because I couldn't sit up with my stitches. So every 2 hours, I'm sitting up trying to feed the baby while he's sleeping in the other room. And I think my mom stayed on for a total of like 3 weeks, and she saw that time, because when I took her to the airport, I just burst into tears. And she said, whatever happens, you and your son will be fine, whatever happens. And I can look back now and see that as soon as my attention went to our son, that's when he really, really acted poorly. Numerous stories of him ruining either serious occasions or special occasions. He barely worked. He didn't handle any of the bills. He didn't handle not a single responsibility in our lives. He looked at me like a mother. I was his, and I took on that role, weirdly enough. Like, I felt responsible for him. I don't know how that happened, but boy, when I looked back, it was like, and my mom was visiting, and one time he came to me and he said, I lost my bank card. Can you order me another one? My mother looked at me. She's like, are you kidding? I was like, well, it's easier. I mean, I handle admin. I'm at the office. It's really, easy for me to do.
So right here, it's a double thing. It's a weaponized incompetence, but he's weaponizing your competence as well. You know how to do things better than me. You're a more competent me. You can do all these things, so you should just do them, because if I do them, it just won't get done in the same way that you did them, and that's just a lot of wasted time. So you just do it, and then I'll go play soccer.
You got it.
So you're really being conned in a huge way, and you didn't know it.
Exactly. And I didn't know it. I mean, I look back now, and I mean, it was the ultimate con. And as my dad says now, he married you for credibility. He did it. It was intentional.
And then eventually you go to see another therapist, a third therapist. So tell us what happens from there.
Yes. And I met with her and I said, listen, I'm looking for a therapist that will not victimize him. Yes, he has things in his past, but we all have to be responsible for who we are today. So I need a therapist that is not going to victimize him, but it's going to hold him accountable for being a part of a family and the responsibilities. So I just need to know that you understand this. And she said, absolutely. Absolutely. I have just written a book about that, about having a backbone, and I will not victimize him. No, I'll tell you what, I mean, it was almost immediate. She was, so you really didn't get that childhood, care and and I mean, almost immediately we were focused on his childhood. I can look back now and see what he was doing. I didn't see it then. I just, because I was already in that feel sorry for him role. So it was just still part of the role. I wasn't seeing it yet that it was a con, but I was sick of it, that's for sure. And I was really at my wits' end for sure. And she, though, again, kind of made me feel like, what did I expect? And so I was going on a girls' trip for a weekend, and I was going to meet my college friends, and he wanted to go to hang out with one of my friends' husband who lived there. And the therapist talked me into it, saying, well, maybe it would be good. Maybe this would be a good thing for you guys to get away for a weekend, And so she talked me into it. So I said, okay, he could come. And my friends were absolutely fine with it because he was a good time guy. I mean, he knows how to have fun. He knows how to cater to everybody and bring drinks and make sure everybody's having fun and that kind of thing. I mean, he's a charmer. And so my friends were fine with it. And then the first night he went with my friend's husband, and we had plans to meet back at a certain place at 11 p.m. after the football game they went to. And we talked to them throughout the game. And then when we were supposed to meet, they never showed up. And he wouldn't answer his phone. And it was about 2 a.m. that he called me, and he pocket called me, and I could hear women in the background and everything. And then about 5 a.m. he called and couldn't find our hotel. And that's when I was like, I want you on a plane, out of here, leave. And all my other friends were arriving that next day. And he went to all of them individually, talked to them all day, cried, showed how remorseful he was. I made such a huge mistake. And my friends were like, gosh, he feels so terrible. He got caught up in drinking and with the guys, and he just feels awful. But after we got back from there, I was done. I was done. I had no desire to try anymore. And back when we had first watched The Secret and we started talking about our dreams for the future, I had made a vision board. And when I tried to think about the thing that I wanted most in my life, if I could think of anything, that I would love, it popped into my head. I didn't even know I wanted it, but I put a picture of a villa overlooking the Mediterranean. So that was my dream. And that was, let's say, 4 years prior, okay, that I'd made this vision board. Well, at this point that I'm ready for a divorce, out of the blue, family that he was a chef for, part-time, asked him if he would come to France, in the south of France, for 1 year to be their chef in their villa for a 1 year opportunity for us to all go as a family. It was absolutely crazy. And some of my friends said, I mean, if that isn't the universe intervening, saying, you guys got to keep trying. And I took that really to heart when friends were pointing that out. And he was saying that, and here he was getting recognized for the first time for his job. And I thought, okay, this is it. Now he's going to feel confident and feel good about himself, that he's really finally getting this recognition.
What I'd like to point out here is two things that are going on. One, this future that you always dreamed of pops back up here, but also going back to who this person was at the beginning of the relationship, where fate has been brought into a situation, and the feeling of what that is inside your body. So you have this dream of the future, and the manifestation stuff that happened is also this fate woo woo kind of stuff. So you kind of have these cycles that are beginning again, and this feeling of fate. Like if this was a movie, this is when that theme song would pop in here, like that, like the score going like ding, and like everyone would feel great for you. Yes, this is what's going to happen. But in reality, we're really watching a horror film, and it should be a different type of music that's coming in here because that fate really is the villain.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, that fate was the villain. It really was. But I took it as fate. And now today, some days, yeah, I think it was in many ways because for whatever reason I had to walk this journey that had to get really, really bad. And I just gotta hope and believe that it was for my bigger purpose in life, hopefully to help others with my experience. So literally from the day of the offer, we I quit my firm, packed up the house, rented it out, sold our cars. In 3 months' time, we were in France. And I started my own practice. And that was pure chaos because this was 15 years ago when we moved here. And there was no infrastructure set up really for remote working. And I mean, I had to absolutely source the craziest things, to find out about how to get a US line and France and all these things. If I would have written it on paper that I was going to do this, I mean, I would have thought I'd lost my mind. But it was kind of a 1-year adventure is what it was supposed to be. But I was working away. We had a group of 5 of us. We brought in a few other attorneys. So we had a group of 5 of us working on these big cases. And so I would work day and night because I would work all day drafting while my son was at school, but then I had to be available for conference calls all night long with my partners. But I was thriving and the adventure I loved. And here we embarked on this adventure together to France. So once again, that cycle repeats. We're both in this excitement, this adrenaline of adventure. We're moving to another culture. So there was parts of me that was like, don't you complain about a thing. You've got everything. You've got the dream. Don't complain about how chaotic, I mean, it was way better than like I used to say right before we moved. I felt like I was on a speeding train that I could not get off because I was being a mother, a head of household, a wife responsible for everything, working hard, commuting. I mean, it was intense. I needed something. And so I felt, well, you can't complain about anything. You've got your dream. So the 1 year we made it through the first year, his contract was not renewed. And then he got another job. And the job required him to be in Greece for like 5 months out of the year. So he would go in June. And then when my son finished school at the end of June, he would go at the end of May, I guess. And we would go to Greece and stay for 2 months in Greece. And then he would stay for the next 2 months in Greece. And so here we had this whole other new exciting adventure happening. And so I think things started to become like almost parallel lives because he was only there in the house, in the winter. The summers were like, crazy, amazing summers in Greece, but I was working in complete chaotic conditions, watching our son because he was out of school, and I'm trying to work and things like that. And I never had any help from him or anything. I still handled all responsibilities, absolutely everything.
And then it comes to parenting. And I think this is what you told me becomes a big issue. So what happens from here?
I'd say when my son was 6 or 7, when he starts to be himself, he starts to have opinions and being who he is, I started to really notice a really strange dynamic. And that's when the arguments really started because I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And I would just look at him and my ex and say, you need parenting classes. You don't even, how can you not know how to parent? He had gotten him a bike and he took him outside to ride it, the bike. I think my son was 5 years old and took him out to ride it. And later in the night, it started raining and he blew up at our son and said, I just bought that for you. I just got you that. And you just left it in the rain. Well, you don't care about anything. And I was like, you have to teach a child. You give it to them and then you say, this is what you do. You take it in when you're finished. You don't just leave it up to a 5-year-old to know what to do with it after you've just given it to them. I mean, it was just weird things that he would blow up over, but he had zero sense of safety for our son. Zero. He could put him in dangerous situations and not think twice. We had a huge argument in Greece one summer when he wanted to take him skateboarding at 10 o'clock at night through Athens. And at the very least, I insisted he had to wear a helmet. And he fought me on it and said that I ruined all the fun and that I was a nag and a nasty person and I ruined everything that was fun. And, you know, so this is where I was dealing with some issues at work. So I was under a lot of pressure and really needed a supportive partner at that point. I was carrying every responsibility and I had nobody there for me. Nobody, I wasn't in a partnership. And when I complained about it and said, look, I think you might need to switch jobs because you're gone too much and I can't handle this. I need some help. And he said, you know, there's just something to be said for being happy in your job. And I'm really happy there. And I don't really care. And I guess there were so many times I sensed that he truly didn't care, but you just can't reconcile that in your head that the person you're married to truly does not care about your feelings. You just can't come to terms with that. And the fact was he didn't care, not at all. I think we were definitely living parallel lives for a while where there just was little interaction except for fighting over his parenting. And I just felt like it was such a strange dynamic that he just wasn't a parent to him. And so we were in Greece in the summer and it was his birthday and things had been tense since I got there because he'd been pretty dismissive and it was his birthday and we had gone to the beach that morning. We were going to the beach that morning and my son wanted to get a waffle and he said no. And I was like, why can't he have a waffle? And he was like, he doesn't need that. He doesn't need that. And I was like, well, he hasn't had breakfast. He can have that. And no, he doesn't need that. That's just crap. And I had no idea. 30 minutes later, he was like, just have some ice cream. I mean, this is like 10 o'clock in the morning. And his behavior was just erratic and, like I said, illogical. And anytime I said something, we'd end up in an argument. And so later that evening, we were supposed to be going out for dinner and we were having a drink. And I told my son that he could go to the hotel bar and ask for a fresh juice that was made there, no sodas. So he went with my ex and they went to the bar and my son came back with a soda. And I said, no sodas. And he said, well, Dad made me get it. And so I was like, you know, what is this? Why would you know that I said to him, no sodas. And I said, it's like you're purposely undermining me. And the fight just erupted. And he said, I'm not going anywhere with you. We were going to dinner. He said, I'm not going anywhere with you. And he turned around and walked back to the hotel. And I looked at my son and he'd done this kind of stuff on his birthdays before, on my birthday, his birthday, throwing temper tantrums. And I said, should I go get him? My son was 9. And he looked at me and he said, no, just leave him. So we went out to dinner, came back, and he was furious at me. And then he looked at me and he said, you want a divorce, don't you? And I said, yeah, I do. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. And he didn't say anything. He sat there for a minute. And then he said, I never expected this for us. And then he looked at me and he said, well, don't worry. I won't go after your money. Now, I was working on a really big case and the money wouldn't come in for many months. And I was, I'm worried about our family breaking up, my son, the effect on our families, everybody, you know, and he's thinking about my assets. I mean, but I didn't hear him. I didn't really hear that. I just like, oh, okay, good. You won't go, okay. You know, money I don't have yet. It just kind of obviously, looking back now, it stands out, in a big way. So we stay in Greece, and he is angry at me, angry, cold, does not want to speak to me. We had friends coming to visit us, but I just wanted him to not say anything because I didn't want to lose my resolve. I just didn't want to lose my resolve. So I kind of silently pled, please don't say anything, please don't say anything. And because I wanted to, hold firm to it. And so we stayed for another month. It was very difficult. And then he got sick at one point and had a fever. And he was like, called me, I'm going to the hospital. I was like, what's wrong? And he was like, you don't care. You don't care. I'm not going to tell you because you don't care. And I was like, of course I care, And later he ends up telling me that he had like a urinary tract infection, which was strange. And we made it through that month, but he was very ugly, didn't want to speak to me or anything. I had to fly back to Colorado for work with my son. We flew back. We were there for a couple of weeks. He would call me, and the three of us would talk, but he would say to me, I really hope we can work this out. I really hope, we can make this work. And I would just not say anything. I would just keep my mouth shut. And then he had this opportunity to go to another country and do this fun job, not part of his job, but another fun job for the month. But he would have to request this time off. It would be a really big deal. And he'd be gone for a month when he should be back to see his son. Not to mention, I've said that I want a divorce. And he's all excited about this opportunity. And he's still saying that he wants to try. Well, he goes. So he came back in November. And I said, look, we just need to make it through Christmas when my parents come. And for our son's sake, we need to just make it work through Christmas. And that's it. And he still wasn't accepting it. He still thought we could work things out and still acting like we would. But then he was just, disappearing quite a bit the days before Christmas and Christmas Eve. He was gone the whole day, paying no attention to his son after being gone for months and stuff. And then on Christmas Eve, I walk into the bathroom and there's a folded piece of paper on the floor, and I find it, and it has these French phrases in his writing, and they're highly sexually suggestive phrases for a woman. So I walk out of the bathroom and I was like, this couldn't wait till after we separated. And I said, as soon as Christmas is over, I want you out of the house. So when Christmas was over, my parents and I and my son, we flew to Paris, and he left and went skiing for a week. And I told him, I want you out of the house. As soon as you get back, you come get your stuff and get out. And he still thought I was bluffing. And he came back and I said, get out. So he said that he went over and stayed at a friend's house. He left that night and said, okay, I'll come back tomorrow and get my stuff. So he, didn't seem to have any plan or anything after I've been saying this for so long. So then that week he comes to get his stuff, and he tells me that he's rented an apartment about like 40 minutes away from us. And I'm like, what? I was like, how are you going to help with our son? How are you going to have joint custody? How are you going to, and I mean, I really thought we were going to have an amicable divorce. I really believed that. So he said, I'll make it work, but I'm also thinking, how in the heck did he rent an apartment that fast? He's never done anything on his own. He doesn't do adult things like that. But I was just glad. I had done it. I had done the hardest part. So I was just like on adrenaline of like, I've done the hardest part. Okay. No turning back now. So he got an apartment. That's great. Don't complain too much that he's not going to help with, and yeah, he proved to not help at all with our son, which I was still trying to be really amicable. And believe it or not, I felt terribly sorry for him. I felt that I was the one giving up on the marriage. And I felt extreme guilt for giving up. And I told him, and I think he was actually working me to feel that guilty, and I wasn't recognizing it. So at some point I said, look, I'll give you a sum of money from my settlement. So things were amicable. And the next month after separating, I invited him to come skiing with us for my son's birthday. And he came up there and everything was very amicable between us and good. And he was on his phone the whole week, very preoccupied. And, I'm like, oh, no telling what he's up to. And then the last night he came back to my place, brought my son back and asked to spend the night in the guest room. Well, I went to bed, he went to bed, and I heard his phone ringing. And I realized he'd left it somewhere in the house. So I went and got it to turn it off because it was going to wake my son up. And I saw messages on his phone, and I saw they were not work related because he had said he'd been on the phone for work the whole previous week. They were not work related. So he left during the night. The next week, he came over and asked to use my car. And I said, why don't you ask your new girlfriend? And he said, I don't have a girlfriend. I said, oh, I think you do. And, of course I was hurt, of course. But I also was saying to myself, well, you initiated this, so you can't be hurt. And so I was a little salty, and saying, well, I think you do have a girlfriend. No, I don't. I don't have a girlfriend. No, I don't. And so he left, and my son was doing homework in the other room, and he said, so Dad has a girlfriend. I said, oh, honey, I'm sorry. You heard me say that. I didn't mean it. I was just angry at him. I didn't mean it. He doesn't have a girlfriend. He said, no, Dad has a girlfriend. It was a statement. I said, what? And he said, Dad has a girlfriend. And I said, you know this? And he said, yeah. I said, do you know her? And he said, yeah, she works with him. I said, have you met her? And he said, of course. So I was shocked, but I could see the relief on my son's face to tell me. And throughout the week, he kept making comments. And he was saying, yeah, he'd tell me he's talking to her about this or that, but that order came in months ago. Finally, I said, what are you trying to say? Are you trying to say that it was his girlfriend before we separated? He said, oh, yeah.
So once you hear that, your belief of what was going on here changes, specifically internally, I'm going to assume. So what are all these feelings that are going on during this time? Because you're trying to be amicable. You're trying to take care of him in this process. And now here's this moment where during this process, you're finding out that no, this hasn't been it's been a process for you, but for them, they've been living their life, and your son even knows about this life. So how are you feeling about what's going on inside of you, and then that your son is privy to these things and how that also affects your relationship?
Well, that was the most devastating factor. I was devastated that my son knew this and had to carry this. And he admitted to me that he had seen photos of them together on his phone from the previous summer. It took the wind out of me. I mean, it knocked the wind out of me. I remember holding the table, standing there, because this whole facade I had of taking care of him and being responsible for him and feeling so guilty, I felt so terribly guilty of that initiating a divorce was, again, I was in that battle in my mind of how could these two things be so opposite? So I was struggling, really struggling to make sense of it. And now remember, this is coming from a 9-10-year-old, so I'm just not sure what to think. And then the following week, I confronted him and he denied it. He said, absolutely not. That's crazy. Of course he saw us together because we work together. He has it wrong, absolutely wrong. That is not correct, and he would see us together because we work together. And I mean, he had all these amazing excuses and everything, and he's denying it so convincingly. And I'm truly confused now. So I bluffed and I said, look, I know everything. I hired a private investigator. I know everything. And for a split second, this look came over his face that told me plenty. But just like that, it was back, his mask was back on. But I saw that glimpse and I knew I didn't know the whole story. So then the following week, he called me. He's crying. He's begging. He's like, you're the only thing that means anything to me. I'm so sorry. You have to forgive me. It was a one-time mistake back in November when I just knew we were not going to work things out. And she threw herself at me. I was so distraught over us that I gave in. It was a huge mistake. I'm so sorry. It meant nothing. She means nothing. She's crazy. She's unstable. I've just been trying to manage the work environment because, I'm just trying to manage her because she's crazy. And he's saying all this, and he said, she threw herself at me, and I just was like so distraught over us. And yeah, our son saw us because of work, but nothing, nothing more than friends. I was shocked when she threw herself at me. I mean, he just laid it on. And he said, all that matters is you and our son, my relationship with you. And I don't care about the money. That means nothing to me. The only thing that matters is my relationship with you and our son. And he's like, I can't we try again? Can't we please try again? I'm like, thinking, God, no, And he said, I just don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I'm really worried. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself. I might do something. Now, insinuating that he was going to hurt himself. And that scared me. And I started calming him down. And I was like, look, calm down. We can navigate this as a family. Just speaking this is hard. We can navigate this as a family. It'll be okay. I didn't say anything about the money, and I certainly didn't say anything about getting back together. I just said, we'll be okay. You'll be okay. We can navigate this as a family. Everything will be okay. 4 days later, as we were preparing the documents to file for divorce in France, 4 days later, I get notice from a lawyer. He's filed suit against me in Colorado. In other words, he was making a play for the money. I mean, it was trying to take in everything, trying to take in that, who is this person? Who is he? Because, of course, I've given you the whole backstory of stuff that only came, in hindsight, not that I was registering as I was going through it. So as you're listening to this, oh, you can see it. But then I was blindsided because my hindsight, my analysis of my marriage only came later after I went through all of this. Because it gets a lot worse. And I only knew a tip of the iceberg at this point. And so he filed suit. And I knew that if we fought it out in Colorado, all the money would go to lawyers. It'd all be gone. And so my father tried to, talk to me, and he said, you don't know what happened. Maybe it was just a one-time mistake. You don't know for sure. You need to think about offering him the money and being done with this. I went back and talked to him again. He just swore to me up and down. It was a one-time mistake, over and over and over. It was a one-time mistake, I swear, and I just want to buy an apartment so I can have our son there. That's all I want for myself, and I want to be a good father, all of this. And, I really didn't know what to do because I knew that fighting it out in Colorado, money would be gone. So I agreed that I would give him a sum of money, but we would do the divorce in France, which was much cheaper. And I said, I'll pay you once the divorce is final. And so he dismissed the Colorado lawsuit. And then a week or so later, he started demanding the money. And I was like, no, I told you from the beginning, I'll pay you when the divorce is final in France. So he settled down, and then he was about to leave for Greece again. And this is about a month later, and he calls me and he said, hey, I have lost my bank card. We had a joint account, but I no longer used it. So it was just his money in there. So this was not my money, it was his. He said, I need to use your bank card. And I didn't even know if I still had mine for this account. But he had called me and badgered. He called like 5 times in the day, trying to reach me. And I said, fine. And I gave it to him. Well, the authorization came through, and it was for a 2,500 euro ring from the London Ring Company. Anyhow, he leaves for the summer. The next month, he starts calling me, demanding, badgering, calling 5 times a day, sending me texts, emails, demanding the money. And I'm like, what are you even talking about? And at this point, we've already filed for divorce in France. I said, as soon as it's final, I'll pay you the money, And he's demanding. And So I'm calling him and I'm like, what is going on? Why are you demanding? Is she pregnant? I need to know. Is that why you're insisting on this right now? Then he tells me it was never her. I met this other girl right before I left. And well, I'd known her for years, but this French girl, but we were only friends. But I realized last month that I'm in love with her. So I bought her a ring. A couple weeks go by and I get a phone call from a woman. It's the woman that my son had said my ex-husband was having an affair with. And she tells me, I've been having an affair with him for over a year, but I just found out he has another girlfriend. She said, I decided you needed to know the truth about everything. She said, I want you to know this. He is after your money. That's all he ever talks about. That's always been his goal. And he's going to do anything to get it. So over the course of, a few weeks, we continue talking. She tells me she was staying in my apartment in Greece the previous summer when I would be away sometimes seeing friends. I mean, she gave me plenty and plenty of details, to confirm everything. There was no question. And so it turned out, though, that he had been having two affairs, two different women. And from there, needless to say, it was going to be over my dead body if I was going to pay him any money. She gave me all kinds of, she said, look, he told me horrible things about you. He hates you. He said that you guys lived in separate bedrooms, that that as soon as your money came in, you would divorce. He said that you were having affairs with your personal trainer and that you guys haven't been together for years. She said he made me believe you were, this horrible person to him and that he was the victim of you, and that it was quite a story he told her. Turns out he had moved out of our home when I insisted and moved in with her. They were living together. So they were living together that entire winter, the one that he called crazy and unstable. They were living together. And in that phone call, when he told me that he didn't know if he might hurt himself or whatever, she was actually pregnant at that time. And they were living together, and she sent me screenshots of their texts where she said he became very erratic then, and saying, oh, maybe you should have the little guy, and then saying, no, you can't. It'll ruin everything. He told her if she lied in court for him, he would, cut her in on the money. I mean, it was beyond shocking, beyond words. It's kind of indescribable, to be honest. And this is when I start to discover that he's already started this smear campaign about me. And so when I confront him, let me just say this: when you take the mask off this type of personality, watch out, because that's when you see the true devil inside. And he knew that I was not going to pay him money, but it was being exposed. I think that's when he decided he was out to destroy me. The loss of control. So things were really, really tough, tense. And he was very erratic with our son. It was all performance. He rarely showed up. And when he did, he neglected him. He didn't give him, any attention. So then it ended up being a 5-year legal battle. It's been 8 years now, but 5 years for the divorce, where my son was concerned, where he lied and manipulated social services. He instituted a criminal investigation against me. He filed numerous police complaints. He moved to have our son removed to foster care when he was 14. I mean, it was an absolute insane legal battle for 5 years until the divorce was final. But I finally prevailed on the criminal investigation. They finally figured out the truth. Child services did a full investigation, but my son still had to go to court. He still had to go to court for this motion to move him to foster care. But the child services determined that he had filed all of this in order to harass me and to leverage me. But when he filed it, I wrote him a message and said, look, I'm terrified. Our son is terrified. We're in a foreign country. What are you doing? And he said, well, if you want all this to go away, then just settle and pay me. So like I said, finally, after 5 years, he lost in the divorce. He lost everything, but he has instituted another filing that is still going through the appellate courts. So it's now been 8 years in court.
So he's used this system to try to get what he wants, but he's continuing this legal abuse through the system that is just made your life difficult, made your son's life difficult. It's hard for you to move on while all of this is going on. So during this time, like, how do you survive? Because you've been in a war for your relationship for a long time with reprieves, but now the gloves are off here in ammunition, in all of the new weapons that you never saw before are coming out of the woodwork here. So how do you go through a day to day like this? And also for people who are going through this, like, can you talk about those feelings and what it was like every day?
For the 5 years of, like I said, was the psychological and legal battle, and with my son being leveraged, I was in pure survival mode. I didn't even have the chance to grieve the betrayals and things like that. I was surviving each day. I mean, I had a criminal investigation against me, I had a child services investigation. I'm terrified for my son. I was literally just on autopilot, just trying to survive. It was only once all of that was resolved and I won everything in the divorce and everything concluded about the same time that everything, I was out of survival mode and everything hit. And it took me, like, going back to my accident where I said that it was the hardest time. I didn't think I was going to survive at that point. I didn't think I was going to keep going. There was a lot of days that I didn't think I could. If it wasn't for my son, I wouldn't have. It was just all way too much. And it was definitely my son that made all that difference, to continue going. But I knew I needed to get help, and I found a therapist, and I got into something called EMDR, and I definitely think that saved me.
So if you had words of wisdom for everyone to hear, what would they be?
Now I've started my Instagram account, and I've been sharing the story on Instagram in short segments. And so I have a lot of engagement with people who are going through similar things. And so it depends on, I'll get legal questions, and I'll have people just so appreciative of the validation. One of the biggest things I do say to people, depends on, if you're in it, if you're going through it, or it depends on where you are. But if you're in a legal battle, you have to find support, and you have to find an attorney that understands pathological personalities. You have to. It's imperative. Nothing is more important than that in the legal battle. I also believe that you have to find a therapist that understands pathological personalities, because there's a lot of unraveling to do that I thought I could do on my own, and I couldn't. And I had to have some kind of validation, somebody, because I certainly thought I was going crazy. And the thing is what people have to realize, it is not us. It is something inherently wrong in them. And the sooner you recognize that and stop thinking their behavior is any kind of reflection of who you are, it is not at all, not in any way. And I think that, therapy can help you to recognize that.
Well, Rebelle, I really want to thank you for being here with us today, sharing your story. And there's a lot for people to get validated by through your story today. I'm happy that, you're out of this. It was a long time, and, there's still legal things, like, it's still there, but I'm just happy you're here to share your story and share your experience and your feelings with everyone today. And, everyone's giving you a big hug. So big thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me. And it felt good to get all of that out. And I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you once again, Rebelle, for being here with us today. And if you want to be a guest like Rebelle was today, please do go to our website at narcissistapocalypse.com, click on the guest form, fill it out, and press the submit button. We also have a support group at our website with Zoom meetings every Wednesday nights, Thursday afternoons, and Saturday nights. And we also have a newsletter at our website that is a very reflective newsletter. And you get a free workbook with every new survivor story. And that is all at narcissistapocalypse.com. And that is it for today's survivor story. So for myself and Rebelle, we hope you have a good night.